Okay, so today our lesson is based on Eric Carley Seahorse book, but mainly the way he illustrated his books. We're gonna recreate the technique to make this pretty collage, and we're gonna learn to do the seahorse. Let's talk about the supplies that we're gonna be needing today. We're gonna be using the black paper for the background, white paper that we're gonna paint. You need to have your handout, which I actually printed like mirrored, so it won't be much of a reference for you today, but it will give you some ideas. And the little Ziploc bag that has all the sequels, the little glitter glue, and this soft tissue paper, color paper. You will be needing your paintbrush, a little bit of water, glue, scissors, and it will be always handy to have your Sharpie for the drawing. The first step is to paint the white paper, create all those mix and matches of watercolor, and we're not gonna be using watercolor to do this. How are we gonna do that? Well, this is the fun part. Just so you know, this part, it can stain the floor, it can stain the table. So make sure you're using either, like I do, I use a board or an old cardboard. You can even open a box of cereal as a mat. Make sure you can work on a surface that can take a little bit of a mess. Take out your tissue paper out of your Ziploc bag. This is what we're gonna be using to stain our paper. Fold your paper in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just like a book. And now we're gonna be using a little bit of water to moist the paper. Just a little bit. You don't want it too damp. And before that dries, go ahead and start applying your tissue paper in random places. Just like that. One next to the other. Make sure you cover everything, and then you choose the colors that you like the most. You can put one on top of the other. You can do double layers. If you have plenty, try to use them all. And try to go for colors that you don't have already, so you have a big variety. And I'm gonna go with another orange. Okay, I have maybe a green here. See, I'm gonna double layer this one, and now I'm gonna grab my paintbrush again and tap, 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 splash water, tap, 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 tap. That's why I told you, you need to work in a surface that can take a little bit of a mess. Want to make sure that all my paper gets some water. Tap, 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 tap. Why am I tapping? So the paper doesn't move that much. Once I have a little bit of water on it, I can actually brush like this. That one moves, see? So tap, tap, tap. Some water, tap, 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 and then apply. You have no control of what's happening in your paper right now. It's more like a very creative experiment, and we're gonna see what happens. What we need to do with this project right now is be very patient, because these need to fully dry. So now that it's all damp, I will fold it and rub and press down. I want all my paper to get exposed to those colors, these ones, the leftovers. I'm gonna take these outside to let it dry, and in about 10 minutes it should be ready. Okay, while we let our paper dry, let's do a quick read of the book that this lesson is inspired. Eric Carley, Mr. Seahorse. Written and illustrated by Eric Carley. Mr. Seahorse. Mrs. and Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse. And she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpet fish hidden in a patch of reeds. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know," said Mr. Seahorse. "Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you're taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Mrs. Curtis laid her egg, and I have stuck them in my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You're right. You're doing a good job," Mr. Seahorse said, and swam by his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Bullhead, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. Mr. Bullhead laid her eggs. Mr. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. "Now I'm babysitting." "You're doing fine. You're doing a fine job," Mr. Seahorse said, and swam on his way. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted his way this way and that. At last the babies tumbled from the Seahorse pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tripled to come back into the pouch. "Oh no," Mr. Seahorse said, "I do love you, but now you're ready to be on your own." The end. So now let's make sure that our paper is fully dry. It cannot be moist, it cannot be damp. It needs to fully dry so we can continue with our project. Okay, so what happens now? You should let your paper fully dry. It cannot be damp, it needs to be dry. And when you open it, look, the papers that were hold with water stained your paper. So now you have all these pretty watercolor effects, just like our artist did in the book. And now we can start our project. So we're gonna draw in one half of our paper our seahorse, and we're gonna leave the other half of our paper to create all these little pretty details for the background. Okay, so if you have this, you can just toss them. We're done with that, and let's do the second half of our project. Okay, so I'm gonna separate my two papers. And we're gonna start our drawing in only one half of the paper. Okay, this is what we're going for. So see, we're gonna make a little seahorse. By accident, I printed the instructions backwards, so you can have them handy just to give it a glimpse, but it doesn't have to be precise. Just follow along with my instructions. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is draw a straight back line, for a straight vertical line for the back of the seahorse, and then like a U shape like that, his little nose like this. Go ahead and close that, leave some room for the neck. Now we're gonna make a tummy, and the tummy actually goes lower than the back line, and the rest is the tail. So you can start from here and connect with the bottom and connect with the back. Now we have our seahorse. Here you have a fin that we're gonna draw just like that. And the little spikes on the top, just like if they were leaves, you can make them as big, as long as you want. It doesn't have to be like the ones on the drawing. You can, if you want, you can make them some even longer, because it's your own seahorse. You can just change it up a little bit, or you can keep them simple, just like this. Now here we're gonna draw Mr. Seahorse eyes, that, and I would like to add a nose and a smile, and I think he's pretty much done. I like to add some texture on his body, so right now I'm just using dots and dashes like this, and maybe draw his pouch. Whatever you think might work for your seahorse. I'm gonna add a little bit more of these textures in here, more dots here and there. I really like how that add up texture to my drawing. And that's pretty much it.